Good morning, sports fans. You're listening to 96.9 FM WHYR-LP Baton Rouge Community Radio.
This is Eric Hatfield along with Coach Perry Daniels, and we are here to bring you the latest, the greatest, the best, and the most entertaining in high school, college, and professional sports. You are listening to Louisiana All American Sports. Good morning. Good morning, Baton Rouge. Today is Saturday, August 23rd, 2014, and we are live on Louisiana All American Sports. This is Eric Hatfield. Hello. This is Eric Hatfield. Sorry about that.
And I'm Coach Perry Daniels.
Along with the conscious one, Terrell Johnson.
And I like that. And we are ready for yet another edition of Louisiana All American Sports here on 96.9 FM WHYR-LP Baton Rouge Community Radio. Well, we're going to probably be on a little bit of a lighter note than last week, but nonetheless, we're going to keep the show going, keep the party going, as we have a whole hour chock full of the good news, the good word in the world of sports. Of course, we have our beloved New Orleans Saints going to action tonight against the Indianapolis Colts. This is the third game of the 2014 preseason. It is, in fact, a dress rehearsal for the boys in black and gold. So we got the Colts tonight. We got Drew Brees finally going to play as he will be matching wits against Andrew Luck. We can probably expect to see Brees playing into the third quarter. Same with Andrew Luck. Saints have looked pretty good in preseason so far. They are 2-0 in preseason. There's still some position battles going on out there. The Saints are battling with of course, the other starting cornerback position, who's going to start opposite Keenan Lewis. You have future Hall of Famer Champ Bailey and Patrick Robinson, who is coming off of a knee injury, in a position battle in camp to see who's going to be the full-time starter. And Sean Payton is intimated as such there might not even be a permanent starter, but they're going to try to hammer that out more tonight, and they're going against one of the best in the league in Andrew Luck, one of the best to play in Reggie Wayne, and then some other guys out there. But nonetheless, it will be an opportunity for these guys to help fill out that position battle. Also, setters Tim Lolito and veteran Jonathan Goodwin. At this point, I have no read on who the starter is going to be coming out of there, but he's going to be the quarterback of the offensive line, so you know the input of Mr. Brees and the performance of Mr. Brees is going to have a lot to do with that. So I have done a lot of chirping for the last 3 minutes. I will let you guys hop in on the black and gold and what we got going on. Take it away, fellas.
Man, I'm interested to see will the Saints have the capability to put up some defensive pressure. I know this game may be a high-scoring affair, fiasco, but I'm very interested to see if the Saints can switch over from their normal offensive onslaught, and I'm interested to see if there's going to be some defensive stopping power. What you think, Perry?
No, you're absolutely right, Professor. Last year, Andrew Luck threw for 3,800 yards. That offense there for the Colts, they average about 340 yards a game. They have a formidable running game with Trent Richardson and Donald Brown. So that is the storyline. What will the Saints defense look like against a formidable offense?
Yes, sir.
You know, and it's a formidable offense, but it's definitely like I said, they have Trent Richardson, they have Reggie Wayne, they have Andrew Luck. The key with that offense really is Andrew Luck. I mean, you have Trent Richardson, who I think we can all safely say underachieved relative to expectations last year. You know, he had a really 2
You say that though, Eric, but they have one of the highest rushing averages per game per team in the NFL.
They did. I mean, they definitely hammer the ball. Richardson at 2.9 yards a carry though in 2013. That's got to. I mean, I understand they had they moved up the net yards, but you've got to improve that.
Donald Brown had 5.3.
Exactly, and that was the counter, and that was where they got it from. But if you're going to have a 1-2 punch in the NFL, and we kind of talked about this the last couple of weeks about how in the modern National Football League, it's not like in the 90s or in the 80s or even in the early 2000s where you had that one featured back, a starting running back who was almost dominating like a starting quarterback. You have to have that 1-2 punch nowadays. At least that's the trend that offenses are going to, and I think that's what the Colts had hoped when they acquired Trent Richardson last year. And you're right, Donald Brown gave them that speed punch and that agility. They got to get the power from Richardson, and we'll see. He definitely, I've read, the Indianapolis Star had talked about him a lot and how in practice he's looking good, but he's going to have to show it on the field when the bullets, I'm not going to say live bullets, but maybe when they're rubber bullets flying in the games.
Should make for an interesting game. Let's move on.
It absolutely should. So that black and gold, they're playing tonight. That's 7 p.m. on CBS. 7 p.m. on CBS. That is a prime time game. Our friend Johnny Manziel, we've talked about him a little bit. Guy is, what can I say? He's going to be noticed no matter what he does. Unfortunately, he might be noticed for one of the wrong things. Last night, during a Monday Night Football game, preseason game, against the Washington Redskins, Johnny Manziel, during the third quarter, after an incomplete pass, kind of a frustrating performance all around for the Browns, but gave the Redskins the bench the old one-finger salute on his way off the field, and the camera was right on him when it happened. And, as if there weren't enough media fodder out there to begin with Johnny Manziel, that just set off the talking heads. Manziel on Friday was fined $12,000 for making the obscene gesture at the bench. 2 days after that preseason game, that game was on a Monday night. By Wednesday, the Cleveland Browns had announced that Brian Hoyer would be the starting quarterback in Week 1. Browns head coach Mike Pettin was not pleased at all with the display, and there's been a lot of speculation about the maturity of Manziel. I guess some of the non-football related stuff. If you look, I've seen the Browns preseason games. If you look at it with your eyes, and if you look at the stat sheet, while neither guy is gangbusters, Brian Hoyer has done nothing to hold on to that starting job. If you look at it on paper, Manziel has more attempts, completions, higher completion percentage, and has a touchdown pass. Hoyer has completed less than 50% of his passes. The athleticism, I think, the edges to Manziel, the ability to throw the footballs to Manziel. But quarterback is an important position, and you can have all the physical skills in the world, but be a time bomb on your team, and it's detrimental.
Exactly what it looks like, which is exactly what it looks like this young man is, and it's amazing to me that he's even considered as a starter. This guy over the 4th of July weekend was caught in a Las Vegas bathroom rolling up a dollar bill. After this incident, giving the finger. It's just a level of immaturity that questions whether or not he should even be allowed the benefits, the privilege of playing in the NFL. And I think it's just atrocious that his fine was only $12,000 when several years ago Michael Vick had the same offense and he was fined $20,000 several years ago.
Well, keep in mind now, at that incident, I know exactly where that was in 2007 against the Saints, if I remember correctly. But remember,
it was against the Saints.
But remember, Manziel's on a rookie contract that pays him around $3-4 million, and Vic was a $100 million man. So I think the fine.
It should be based on the offense.
That's not the NFL's personal conduct and fine policy is based in part on player's salary. Basically, how hard are you hit the player?
There is a cap. There is a cap. However, they did not maximize it with this penalty here. So, but unless the professor has something, let's move on from Johnny Manziel.
No, let's continue.
Alrighty. So, speaking of Michael Vick, we moved right along, and we have the New York Jets have finally announced their starting quarterback. Not a big surprise coming out of Gotham. Geno Smith, who was the who pretty much backed into the Jets starting quarterback position last year after Mark Sanchez suffered a season-ending shoulder injury in the final preseason game, showed some flashes of ability, got some wins, but of course looked like a rookie last year. Well, he's got it all his own this year. He is the man. The Jets have kind of been setting that up. I think they brought Michael Vick in, number one, to have a reliable backup, and I think he's as good of a backup as you're going to get in the NFL, and also to kind of push Geno Smith along, let him feel some competition. And Geno Smith has looked solid, and just judging by coaches' feedback, they seem to be pleased with his progression, and the Jets announced that Geno Smith will be the Week 1 starter for the New York Jets. Rex Ryan broke that news after Smith played probably his most solid game. It was a 35-24 preseason loss to the New York Giants at MetLife, a little Subway preseason matchup. But nonetheless, Sanchez, good grief. Smith seems to be progressing along very well. He's looking sharper with his reads. But I still think the Michael Vick acquisition was a good one because Smith is not a big guy, and with injuries in the NFL, you can't have a better guy to come off the bench who can make an experienced guy who can make some plays. So I think it's a win-win for Gang Green.
Yeah, I think that Smith was somewhat sporadic last year, but I think ultimately he has made some progressions, as Eric mentioned. But however, I think that Vic will ultimately move into the starting role as the season progresses. He is still a rookie, and he still has those sporadic spurts. But as Eric mentioned, he has played solidly during the preseason. I have observed him. So.
Geno's in his second year. And I just love what the Rex Ryan coaching staff has done here. They have backed that young quarterback up with a veteran of the same prototype, someone who can mentor him regarding the schemes and play in the NFL. So I just think this is a great move. I look for the Jets to really contend for the AFC East with the great work that former LSU standout Carl Dunbar is doing up there with that defensive line.
Great job.
I just really think that these guys are really positioning themselves with the acquisition of Johnson at running back, Chris Johnson. They're going to have a better running game. I'm just excited about what these Jets have done, and Rex Ryan needs a breakout year, a standout year,
he does.
Or else he's going to have to look for another job.
Yeah, no, Rex Ryan is on. He's definitely on strike two, and he just got a very generous call inside of the plate, so to speak. Switching sports analogies, yeah, he's on the hot seat. I totally agree.
Yes, sir.
Moving on in the NFL. A lot of folks remember everyone, the name Ndamukong Suh, of course, probably rings a bell with everybody. Big guy, incredible talent, incredible physical specimen. Little has had a lot of lapses in judgment, but nonetheless on the field is just a part that blows up the middle of an opposing offensive line. He was drafted in 2010 in the first round. The following year, the Lions drafted defensive tackle Nick Fairley out of Auburn University with the 13th pick in the 2011 draft. And the expectation was astronomical. You look at Fairley; he was a dominant force in the SEC. This is a lesson out there. First of all, it's just a surprising football story. Nick Fairley was demoted to the Detroit Lions' second team last week. He entered camp at 308 pounds. His weight has ballooned to 315 pounds, and he says that his eating habits have been out of control. And it's been an ongoing tug of war between Fairley and coaching. This is a two-pronged story. One, from a football standpoint, it's just surprising to see this talented player who's shown all this potential drop so far so fast. This is a guy we expect to be going to Pro Bowls on a regular basis and to really be a force in the middle of the line. And also, it's a lesson. We Louisiana All American Sports, when we're not on the terrestrial radio waves, we're on the World Wide Web delivering the finest in sports, high school sports to you. And this is a lesson. We have a lot of kids, a lot of coaches that listen, and this is a lesson out there to some of these young athletes. It's not where you're from, it's where you're at. So where you're from, that's also a bounce tribute to Joe Black. But it's where you're at.
My good friend Joe Black.
Oh, I didn't know you knew Joe Black. Yeah, man. And Joe Black now does income tax or something like that. So he parlayed that little money, man. But look, I mean, you have to, when you're in the NFL or when you're even in life, any stage in life, listen up, kids. You have to continue to produce to reap the benefits and gain. You cannot rest on your laurels. Resting on your laurels will give you perhaps some short-term relief, very short-term relief, but you cannot take your foot off the gas for any indefinite period of time. And what happened with Fairley, conditioning is key in football, especially in pro football. Your body's your moneymaker. And Nick Fairley let it slip, and now he's demoted. His career is, I believe this is a contract year for Fairley, and it could hit him in the pocketbook and long-term in the career. So remember, you got to keep grinding every day, hard work every single day. So I believe that's going to wind down, I guess, most of our NFL news. Perry, we got three little things in the NFL blotter. We have Isaac Redmond, Donald Stevenson, and of course the silly situation. We're going to talk about at the end. Do we want to go into these now? Or we want
let's keep going until our guest calls in. One thing regarding the Nick Farley situation, out of control eating is usually due to an emotional disorder. It's just a sad situation that he's professed. Well, I guess that's the good thing, that he has professed.
That's true.
Eating is out of control. Hopefully he can get that under control. And an athlete of his caliber, I'm sure by the end of the season, he should be back into playing shape and back into the starting lineup if they can get the ancillary issues under control.
Right. I'm in complete agreement with that. And Coach Perry Daniels works with young people. Look, you have an example in the pros. You have an example over the air. And, at least I will say this much, Perry, and I agree with you. You said something that struck a nerve. He, unlike a lot of guys, and we've seen a lot of talented players in the NFL let their weight, really hamper their careers. At least he has the presence of mind to acknowledge the problem. So best of luck to Mr. Fairley in that. I hope he can get it together because that young man's got a lot of talent. Go ahead.
Let's go Donald Stevens.
Donald Stevens, all right. Donald Stevenson, speaking of trying to maximize your ability, there's a right way and a wrong way. Donald Stevenson chose the wrong way. Kansas City Chiefs right tackle Donald Stevenson on Friday was suspended for the season's first 4 games for violating the NFL's policy on performance-enhancing substances. This is a big blow for the Kansas City Chiefs. Dwayne Bowe, wide receiver, former LSU player, was suspended for the season opener against the Tennessee Titans for getting in trouble, being found with a little wacky tobacco last year, and then asking where the Sonic was. And now you have your right tackle, Donald Stevenson, who's out for 4 games. This is a Kansas City Chiefs offensive line in peril. Eric Fisher, who by most accounts underachieved last year, was moved from from right tackle to left tackle. Eric Fisher, the first pick in the 2013 NFL Draft, was moved to left tackle, mainly out of requirement. The Chiefs didn't have the cap space to keep the reigning veterans. They moved Fisher over. Fisher has struggled throughout training camp and preseason. Now you have a right tackle who's not going to be there. This is really hurting the team. Perry, I'll let you pick up on this one. This is a little bit more your baby than mine.
Well, it's a sad situation. This guy makes, on average, about $703,000 a year. He's going to miss 4 game checks in this situation. He has taken full responsibility. He says that it was a medical situation that he just did not seek permission from the NFL for. So if he would have sought permission, he believes that the NFL would have granted it, and he would be fine. Yeah. So it just seems like a red tape or a logistical matter that he did not take care of, which is leading to the loss of revenue for these 4 games.
But we've heard that rationale before from players that they didn't seek a TUE, that's a therapeutic use exemption. We've heard that before with a lot of players, and I'm starting to wonder if the league, there's one side of the story, there's the other side of the story, and the right story usually lies somewhere in the middle, and I'm wondering, is this kind of an after the fact to save face, or did he really take this not really seeking a TUE because he didn't have a legitimate reason for a TUE and he got busted? I don't know, but because we hear this a lot with a lot of players with these fertility drugs and also, oh, by the way, masks, steroids, and HGH usage.
Right.
I don't know. It's one of those things, but players are responsible for what they put in their bodies, and as you move up the hierarchy of sports from high school into college into the pro ranks, you have less and less leeway, and at the end of the day, you got to man up and lead yourself from the front, if that makes any sense.
Indeed, it does.
Well, it's going to end up costing him about $175,000 over those 4 games that he's going to lose.
175. Geez, that's a lot of money.
If you're making several million, that may not seem that big, but when your average salary over your 4-year contract is $703,000, $175 is an awful lot.
It is an awful lot, and you don't have the extra disposable income on the back end to take care of yourself like somebody with multi-millions. But I'll tell you what, one thing I've learned about people with money, whether they have a lot of money or a little money, nobody likes losing money, and that's a lot of money. Does that make sense? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Professor, anything there?
No, not exactly that, but I would be remiss if I omitted something, as I noticed that Eric is donned in his Drew Brees jersey. I would be remiss if I didn't mention my Green Bay Packers. It seems as though we've had a light oversight with that, but they played last night. However, and Drew Brees,
A-Raj.
A. Rodgers, which is my guy. I'm saying Eric is sitting here donned in his jersey, so I'm blinded by the Saints. But the Green Bay Packers looked phenomenal last night in a 31-21 victory. I'm really looking forward to seeing their season opener against Seattle. The Green Bay Packers have a slew of running backs now. Starks is a man. Eddie Lacy looked well also. And Aaron Rodgers, again, looks phenomenal. And I'm really excited about seeing them play. I don't know if Eric is doing a little bit of hating by omitting my Packers.
No.
However, I had to interject that.
Oh, no. Let me tell you, we're going to talk a lot. Let me tell you, and I know, Professor Johnson is one of our newer regular cast members. But let me tell you, when the regular season starts, this is a football-dominated discussion, and the stars, like Rodgers, get a lot of airtime.
Yes,
it's
sir.
Exhibition play right now, so it's pretty much Saints and whatever gets people's attention, like, rookie quarterbacks who roll up dollar bills and throw the one-finger salute. So, but no, we're not hating. We are not hating. No way.
So, but let me tell you though, Professor Johnson, that Green Bay organization is my favorite organization in professional sports in the United States because it is community-owned, which I think they all should be. So we're going to make sure that we give them a fair amount of coverage based on that alone. Eric, I'm a little confused on our break music. Now would be a great time to go to our KRS-One. That's the sound of the police, and I'm not quite comprehending what we got going on there.
We are having a how should I put this? The MP3 and internet is not going to be available to us today, so we can go to break, but we'll probably have to go to the announcements. And
wait. I believe Professor has it on a jump drive. We don't need the internet for that.
Yeah,
Am I correct?
Perry, that's not an option.
Okay.
We got a couple of options. We can certainly go to the melodic sounds of the background music of WHYR and take a powder if we like.
Well, no, let's just keep pushing through.
Okay.
Let's transition. In fact, now would be a good time for the professor to get into his segment.
All righty. Professor?
Indeed, I'm always excited and ready to do my thing. First and foremost, I would like to give a strong shout out this morning to the McKinley Senior High School class of 1986. They're meeting today at the Alumni Assembly. The McKinley, which is Perry Daniels, is a member of this illustrious class. But first and foremost, I'd like to pay deference to the tree that bore me as a fruit, the Southern University Department of History, under the guide of such illustrious men as Dr. Raymond Lockett, Dr. Charles Comedy, and Dr. Charles Vincent. All these men's scholarship is impeccable. I have a very interesting segment today, but first I want to mention an email that a young lady sent me in, and she said that she enjoys the show, and she said that she was very interested in our edginess and some of the topics that I elucidate on. She said that they seem somewhat edgy, and she wanted to know why I always come from an angle of racial connotations. And I would like to say to her that I always attempt to bring things in a historical context. And it is my effort not to speak on black or white history per se, but honest and truthful history. I am attempting to fill in the gaps that have been misplaced or displaced through various historical omissions. So with that being said, hopefully that gave some clarity to my friend who sent me the email, and I hope that she is listening. Now, today's topic is on a situation called sundown towns. I know many of us may remember when Mom and Dad used to say, "Boy, you better get in before the street lights come on." However, this was just not a statement that was being made. Some towns have actually legislated these things into place, and I will give you a brief historical overview, because people of color, for 150 years since the start of the bloodiest battle ever, motivated by racism and the Civil War, were routinely excluded from certain communities. This exclusion can be subtle or blatant. One example is Hawthorne, California, which in the first half of the 20th century probably said it best on its city limit side, N-word, "Don't let sundown catch you" in Hawthorne. Such towns were clearly posting signs to display their mistrust of blacks and their hatred of blacks. These towns were blatantly called sundown towns. It was this kind of place where blacks were known to be caught and lynched after sundown. Now, this was during an era after Reconstruction and before Jim Crow, which was about 1890 to about 1965. This whole period was going down, and at the close of my statements, I'll tell you what brought it to an end. However, sundown towns numbered in the thousands, and more can be examined throughout history. Most community promoters were wanting a attraction to settle promotional flyers. These circulations went out by realtors in the area, and speculators found out that the key to it was the promotion of white flight. And actually in Louisiana, through some research, I found out that there's a small listing of certain sundown towns. One in familiar is Crotch Springs. Many of you may be familiar with this small area. Another one is Pollock, Louisiana. I'm not absolutely sure if these theories, these legislations were put in place. However, I'm doing research now to determine if Denham Springs was possibly a sundown
Could
town.
have been.
Because we know some of the legends or stories that have been told about Denham Springs and the things that occurred in this era. But this was a tumultuous era in black history, well, in American history. And actually what brought this whole venture to a close was the Fair Housing Act of 1968. Black folk were actually being forced to move out of these towns, and they were white-only areas. This is an area of scholarship from a historical perspective that I know a lot of individuals don't know about. So I thought that it would be somewhat timely to share this, since we have the little uprising or civil unrest in Ferguson, which we discussed last week. So I just kind of found this poignant to display. So for our listening audience, if you get an opportunity to go out there and Google, you have the Super Information Highway, go out and Google sundown towns. And remember, always investigate the information you receive. If it is indeed the truth, Eric, it shall stand the test of investigation.
Sorry about that, Professor. I wanted to say I like that public service tag at the end. It's been a kind of a regular thing. It's almost like, kind of like Smokey says, only you can put out forest fires. Investigate. Say that one more time.
Always investigate the information you receive. If it is indeed the truth, it shall stand the test of investigation.
I like that, man. I've been borrowing a lot of your catchphrases. You're welcome
to it.
You're welcome Absolutely, Professor. And there is no such thing as black history or white history. It's just history.
History, that's right.
Sir. Yes, sir.
And I like to say, man, big props to the people of Ferguson and of St. Louis. I know that they have received a lot of negative images on television and around the world. Let me say to my young relatives there in St. Louis that I am extremely proud of you. It is you that has the whole world looking at America and exposing what is going on in your city. And some people may not agree with the tactics that you have used. However, I applaud that you have got out and done something.
Well, I'll tell you what, this broadcaster agrees with the tactics they use. And you know what the tactic they're using? It's called the First Amendment of the Constitution of the United States of America. And, you know, we're not going to go on a complete segue, but there are two things I wanted to kind of talk about real quick. And I'm not going to get off. My voice is not going to raise octaves like last week. But two things. Number one, it disappoints me that certain news outlets, Fox, have put up these headlines saying, you know, protesters caught looting. Let me tell you something. You have protesters who are abiding by the law, the First Amendment, and you have looters who are criminals. Protesters are not looters. Looters are looting. Protesters
Hold on, Eric. Because, see, if I remember my history lessons correctly, there was a lot of looting going on in Boston of the King's Tea, which led to the formation of independence of this country.
Wow.
But no one seems to want to point that out. So if these people are looting so that it would lead to independence, loot on, my brothers, loot on.
Ooh.
Wow.
Let me just finish this point then, and I'll yield the floor. I guess this is where we're going to have one of these differences of opinion. I think the police and the state troopers, instead of training their rifles and tanks and tear gas and all this stuff on people who are in the streets, mind their business, exercising their right to protest, why don't we see them, if they'd spend more energy taking care of these guys who are breaking into business and stealing stuff, you know, to me, I think that'd be a much better use of police's time instead of frankly harassing people that are engaging in their constitutional right to protest. The second part was on a lighter note related to Ferguson, and since we are a sports show, and this is a hot topic, it's worth mentioning that almost said Tennessee Titans, good grief. St. Louis Rams head coach Jeff Fisher allowed 3 Ferguson area high schools to utilize the Rams practice facilities because the schools in Ferguson are still closed, but allow them to use the practice facility, and they even let the players get in on like a breaking of the huddle with the actual Rams players, which I think has got to be the coolest thing in the world for our high school football players. So big props to Jeff Fisher, class act all around. There's a reason he's been in the league for a long time. But Perry, I'll yield the floor back to you because I'm sure we probably don't, and I mean, I'm sure you probably have a response to that. I just wanted to get that out.
No, not at all, Eric. I've kind of stated my position there, and I think it's disingenuous to omit that. And I could just imagine, well, I will say this, I would imagine how the people of England spoke about their cousins in this newly formed experiment called America as they were looting the King's Tea. So don't let what others say regarding you, as I'm speaking to the youth of St. Louis, continue on your mission. Get some respect and make a change. I noticed that Los Angeles, 2 days after Michael Brown was shot in St. Louis, Ezell Ford was shot in Los Angeles and killed, a 25-year-old African-American. And it was a much different reaction. And it was a much different reaction because 20 years ago, the citizens of Los Angeles did what the citizens of St. Louis are doing now. And that made the police change its engagement with the community. So now they're not as angry as they were when the motorist...
Rodney King, the late Rodney King.
Yes, when Rodney King, when that situation happened and those incidents broke out in Los Angeles. So now, 20 years later, with Ezell Ford and his killing, unarmed, African-American, by a dominant culture police officer,
yes, sir.
there was not the same response that you have in St. Louis because it's a different culture in Los Angeles now. I have to go to as I was delivering that, our interviewee called in. So, Professor Johnson, if you will take over, and I'll click over and check on that.
Thank you, Perry. I would love to interject. As Perry said, that was an excellent analogy of the King's Tea. I mean, America was founded in the spirit of revolution. of course, I understand that, and I take that in its proper context. But I want to say something about the Ferguson scenario. Many of you may recall, if you were students of history, the things that were going on in Birmingham, Alabama. And when Bull Connor was there, the media was the major catalyst that brought major attention and put Birmingham on the world stage. This is the first time that people were seeing the hoses brought out, the dogs brought out. And many of us see these images that they display when they show Black History Month, or whenever they do a clip about the 60s, they always show Bull Connor. He was a big dog in Alabama, and he was the one that was utilizing. And so finally, President Johnson had to bring federal forces in to intervene because these things were transparent. I applaud what the media does. Their ratings are going out the ceiling, and they're putting a constant view of people seeing what's going on. And these are the types of events that bring and regulate change, and hopefully we can reach a resolution there with the egregious and heinous acts that have happened at the killing of this young black man. Yes, sir.
Oh, boy. Well, while we're waiting for Perry to get our guest on the line, we do have a little more football news. This was kind of disappointing. Isaac Redman, Pittsburgh Steelers running back, just a hard player. And, of course, in a town like Pittsburgh, real blue-collar town, on a team that has a tradition of defense and running, he really was endeared himself to the Steelers fans. Unfortunately, Isaac Redman, who's only 29 years old, had to walk away from the game because of a career-ending spinal injury. He suffered it probably at some point in 2013. This is a guy who, he ran hard. He had a 4.2 yards per carry average in his first 3 years in the league through 2012, and then it plummeted to 1.2 yards per carry last season, and it looks like the injury was probably a big explained a lot of the struggles that he had. So Redmond had to step away from the game. He went to see the same fellow that worked on Peyton Manning, Dr. Watkins. He said after 2 MRIs and a CAT scan, he told me I'd suffered a career-ending injury to my spinal cord. Various teams have called, but as you see, I was unable to go. I'd like to thank all my fans for the tremendous support throughout my career. It's just disappointing to hear that. Yeah, it's a dangerous game. You're right. And, we player safety is a recurring theme. And, when players with big names, the guys who get in the TV commercials get hurt, it shines a light. But it's like David Wilson, whom we discussed a couple of weeks ago, and now Isaac Redman. These are all too common. I don't know the answer, but, moms are often watching and listening. And Roger Goodell, I don't know the answer. I don't even have a hypothesis, but I know something has to be done to keep that pipeline of talent coming in, or else mom might direct their kids to the basketball court or the soccer field.
Right. Unfortunately, gentlemen, St. John High's practice is running long. Xavier Lewis may not be able to join us today. He is a 5'10", 175-pound cornerback for East St. John who has committed to play football next year with LSU. And it's just unfortunate that he's unable to join us today. His coach was kind enough to call me and let me know that they got a late start this morning, and that's the situation. So I guess we can go ahead and transition from football into our discussion regarding large schools and small schools and the dilemma that they are facing.
Absolutely.
Now that the rules have kind of changed.
Absolutely.
With this recent ruling.
Absolutely.
So go ahead, Eric, if you'll lead us in.
Yeah, sure. I'll be glad to lead us in. And actually, Perry, before we leave this topic, I actually have a very interesting ancillary story I kind of happened across this morning related to this topic that I think our audience will find very interesting. But the NCAA, the power conferences in major college football just got more powerful. We've been aware of the Ed O'Bannon suit and some of the Northwestern players attempting to unionize, and the NCAA Division I Board of Directors on Thursday, they voted 16-2 to allow schools in the top 5 conferences to write a lot of their own rules. That would be the SEC, ACC, Pac-12, Big Ten, and Big 12. Those are your power conferences there, plus Notre Dame. And they're allowed to make a lot of their own rules with some autonomy involving, for example, student stipends, staff sizes, recruiting rules, hours spent on individual sports. This is basically extracting, I think this is the NCAA's effort to try to keep these power conferences, the money makers, under their umbrella while allowing them at the same time to frankly determine a lot of their own destinies, which they've been demanding. The risk, and Perry had alluded to this multiple times since we started the Louisiana All American Sports show, is that eventually these conferences have enough. They could do their own thing, and it could be the end of the NCAA. So I think the NCAA made a very face-saving move with that vote. But what it has done now, it has put the power conference schools at an even greater competitive advantage against the non-power conference schools. Your CUSAs, your Big Wests, your Big Skies, your SWACs, your MEACs. And this is really Perry's baby. I'm just the mouthpiece on this one, so I'm going to let Perry go ahead.
Well, I'm just wondering, what does this mean for the future of those smaller schools? You had June Jones, the current head coach of the SMU Mustangs, football head coach. He suggested about a month ago that maybe what those smaller schools need to do is move to a model to where they play football in the spring. And then that way, that would accomplish two things. That would do what these Big Five schools hate to do, which is play each other.
Right.
It would force them to play each other in non-season games, in non-conference games. And they hate to do that. So that would help in that situation, but then it would also give them more exposure because they're playing at a time of the year where where citizens are starving for their fix on football.
I got that right. You got that right. And Perry and I talked about this a couple of weeks ago, and I'm like, all the other sports are going to be like, no, stop. Y'all taking up too much. This is our chance. Basketball and baseball and the other, the non... the non-football related sports. I mean, football is just becoming the 800-pound gorilla of the American sports scene, which it is. And you move that. You got some football star folks, myself included, who, unless it's NBA playoffs or a big matchup, I'm tuning in to watch the action on the gridiron. So I think it's a very good brainstorm by June Jones. I don't know if it'll come to fruition or not, but I like thinking out of the box as a means of innovation. And I got to say, it definitely, when Perry brought this to my attention, made my little antenna go up. I'm like, yeah, spring football, it counts. All right.
Indeed, I concur with that whole scenario. I think that would be an excellent idea, as you said. It's a win-win across the board.
Right.
For the networks, as you said, for the fans that are starving for sports during this time of year when it's a downtime, if you will. And it also puts the spotlight on these other conferences as well.
And what do conferences like the MEAC and the SWAC do? Do they follow that model? Do they go to, I've heard proposals regarding that those schools develop their own playoff system.
Right.
Because, one, they just haven't had much success in the current 1AA playoff system.
Right.
So do they develop their own? What happens to those schools?
Perry, I was thinking about that, and that is going to be and of course this is all hypothetical at this point. It's just something June Jones said that, actually made a lot of sense, and maybe it's something to think about. It's not going to happen this year or next year, but let's say it does happen. You have schools that are in the SWAC and the MEAC that are heavily rooted in tradition. Some of their revenue stream is dependent on that tradition, such as, for example, the Bayou Classic, the SWAC championship game. They're going to have some tough decisions to make. Do you want to sit here and compete with the TV rating and revenue hogs in the fall, and still continue those traditions, which with your unique traditions help generate revenue and tradition and support? Or do you go to the spring where your big boys aren't competing, and maybe you have an opportunity to capture some more of the attendance and ratings, and maybe with your traditions, with the bands and some of the unique and cool stuff, frankly, about historically black college football. Maybe you get a larger lion's share of the ratings and revenue. It's going to be tough, and it's going to require some sharp minds to do a lot of analytical thinking. But it's an opportunity, and if should a transition like that happen, I think it could be, there are going to be some decisions that have to be made, and I'll let you go ahead and Professor.
Well, it is going to be very interesting. I recall years back when I was attending Grambling that Grambling, when they were dominating the SWAC, many times would forego the playoffs to play Arkansas State or somebody of that nature just for that big pot of gold at the end of the rainbow at the Bayou Classic. And I think that was the situation for many of the smaller conferences that but Perry, that was interesting point that you made, also that Eric made about the tradition and the whole spring transition. I mean, it's going to just be very interesting to see what model that they decide to follow.
It sure will
be. Tell me this, Professor. How do we get the best talent back into HBCU schools? What do we do to convince them that it is them that they are making the school? The school isn't making them. Without their talent, the SEC is nothing. If you take the African American players out of the SEC is an also-ran. How do we get them back into the HBCU?
I'll let you go first.
Okay, Eric is he's salivating at the he's in the starting blocks on that one. I think personally, this is a conversation that's near and dear to me. We often speak on this in the barbershop. This is something that comes up all the time. We're talking about getting to the next level. I'm a proponent that if we always allow our best and brightest to go off and be bought or auctioned off or brought in due to financial difficulty. I mean, it's a thin line. It's a major conundrum that we're facing with my economic situation. I'm trying to get to the next level. Do I go to Nebraska? I'm going to be on TV and I have an opportunity to play in a national championship game, or do I go to Southern where we have the mythical black championship, which is a term that I don't hear them use that often anymore.
Yeah, and Perry hit me to the game last year. That SWAC MEAC playoff, they don't do that anymore because of the timing of the championship game. Right. So it doesn't exist doesn't exist the way it used to anymore.
Right. The mythical black championship.
You know what, though, P? What else is a myth? Let me interrupt you real quick. What else is a myth, though? We had 5 NFL Hall of Fame inductees this past month, and 3 of them went to HBCUs.
Okay. Yes, sir.
So you can't. So I can't quite buy the argument that you have to go to play with Nebraska and these other schools in order to make it.
Well, no, you don't. But I mean, these young people are. This is a once in a lifetime. I'm talking about for the folks who are truly talented and have an opportunity to play professionally. It's a once in a lifetime opportunity to pick that next step from high school to college. And I think there's a short term and a long term strategy that would have to be at play. Because these kids in the short term are not going to not go to power schools if they're offered, the scholarships, the better facilities. I mean, you're going to do what's in your best interest. But
Aeneas Williams didn't have stellar facilities.
He did. He also wasn't.
Michael Strahan.
But he wasn't recruited out of high school either. He wasn't.
Michael Strahan was. You know what I'm saying? So it doesn't matter where you go. How do we get to the point to where we convince not only the students but the parents that it doesn't matter where you go. It is you that makes the program. Take, for example, the young man that just came out of St. Aug, the running back.
Leonard Fournette.
He still would have been the #1 recruit, whether he went to Jackson State, Southern, Grambling, or LSU. He still would have been the #1 recruit. He still would be considered a high draft choice. It doesn't matter where he went to school.
I disagree. I mean, you can become a high draft choice and achieve. You look at guys like Steve McNair and Terran Armstead, left tackle for the Saints, who was a 3rd round pick. You definitely can do it, but your mountain is a lot higher if you're at a school that doesn't get the exposure and doesn't have the resources that the power schools have. I think it's a 2-pronged approach. You mentioned some individuals, and there are definitely individual talents out there. But if you look in if you look at the numbers, I guess from a macro standpoint, that's a really today, right now in 2014, that's a tougher road to get to the pros. I think there's a two-pronged approach that would have to happen here. First of all, in the short term, I think you'd have to seek those players like Michael Strahan, like Taron Armstead, like others who are, this isn't a word, lureable to the smaller schools, sell them on the tradition, sell them on the individual attention they'll receive, on the benefits, and try to get more and more of those players in, because you're not going to get the resources to compete overnight. In the long run, ultimately it's all about the Benjamins. If you want to see swaths of talented players playing at these smaller schools, and there needs to be some financial and fundraising and planning to make these schools competitive with the big schools. I mean, if I'm a four-star recruit and you're looking at LSU versus Southern, I mean, look, it's always what's in it for me, and what's in it for me as far as being on television, as far as facilities, scholarships, resources at the university's disposal. I mean, you've seen those. We've all seen the practice facilities. It's just and the dormitories and the way these guys are allowed to eat and all this. It's.
So let me tell you what's in it for you. What's in it for you is it empowers your community. There is no greater business model than the HBCU in the black community. It employs more African Americans than any other business in the black community. We spend more money with the HBCU than any other African American owned business. This is for you. This is for you, your grandchildren, and generations to come. You can solve all of Southern University's financial issues by going to the Final Four. One time. One time.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So if you take 7 or 8 young, highly talented young men, instead of them getting together and deciding to go to Kentucky, if they decided to go to Southern, they're only staying for 1 year anyway, so it's not like they're going so that they can have the Kentucky brand on their resume.
Right.
You know what,
They're
Perry?
going strictly to play basketball.
You know, Perry, that gave me a little light bulb just went off in my head while you were saying that, and it kind of ties back to the central theme of this topic. You know, if schools like the smaller schools were allowed to write their own rules like the Power Five, you know, in basketball in particular, it only takes one player, maybe two, that can lift an entire basketball team. So let's take a school like Southern, for example, and let's say that under the SWAC rules, these schools are allowed to throw the kitchen sink at a talented player.
Right.
You get a 4 or 5 star recruit that can drag you through the tournament up to the Sweet 16, the Elite 8, maybe the Final Four. That will get that light shone upon your university. And then all of a sudden it's starting to look attractive. And you talk about the cool stuff with Southern and the football and the tailgating and the bands and you know, the fraternities and all these things. And then that becomes a magnet, a draw. Much like Aeneas Williams, he was representing Southern during his Hall of Fame speech. You know, you get those people who can get those spotlights. To me, if the smaller schools were allowed the latitude the Power Five were, maybe they can marshal those resources and get a big dog and start to get some of that spotlight, more of the spotlight shown upon them. That just popped in my head, Perry, while you were saying that, but maybe that could be a short-term solution leading towards that long-term that I was talking about.
Yeah, and very much so. I recall when Chris Jackson from Mississippi, they say that Chris actually was on the borderline, was on the verge of going to either J-State or Alcorn. That would have had major ramifications to the basketball world. And with the addition of maybe one more big player, I could have very easily seen one of those schools going, Jackson State or Alcorn, going far into the tournament.
Yeah, definitely.
And you know what, Professor? And for that individual, he may not have had the issues that he had as a professional because he would have been deeply rooted in who he is, which is what HBCUs do for our citizens, for our youth.
I agree.
So he may not have had those issues that he ultimately had in the NBA. So there's a greater need than chasing the dollar. We have to look at the overall being and the overall community. And here's a way. We talk about pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. Well, this is the way to do it.
Yes, sir.
That we start spending our money, and ultimately we have to pay it back, but it's the government giving us money, loans, however you're getting them, and give them to an HBCU institution so that we can propel or continue on with this mission. And Eric, I know we didn't get a chance to get to baseball, but we've been holding off on this discussion for a long time, man, and this could probably take up another show.
Speaking of another show, coming up in about 4 minutes, we have Noel Jackson with Music Satisfaction. Here on 96.9. Here on 96.9 FM, WHYR-LP, Baton Rouge Community Radio.
So, you know what, Professor? As you were talking about the sundown community, I couldn't help but think back to last week's Jewel, where you were speaking on Johann Frederick Blumenbach, who mentioned that the pale-skinned inhabitants of the Caucasian Mountains were the most beautiful and virtuous and benevolent on the earth.
Oh, Lord, Uncle Ruckus thinks that's his personal hero. Oh, the Caucasian woman. Yeah. That's for you Boondocks fans.
Yes, sir. That was quite an analogy. As Perry mentioned last week, I shared, briefly, not to monopolize a great deal of time, but I shared some information on the origins of the term race, and Perry just mentioned the gentleman's name, Johann Blumenbach, who actually coined the term race. Now, in the English language, there's various uses for words. Now, we're not talking about a physical competition race, but he utilized it in the sense of breaking it down, different groups from geographical areas based on a phenotype. Phenotype means skin color, physical characteristics. And he broke it. Blumenbach is the individual that is accredited with the distribution of this information. He created the term Caucasian, Mongoloid, and Negroid. And also he utilized some scientific data because there's some illustrations of the sizes of the skulls. But at any rate, Blumenbach said that if you want me to explain the period, Blumenbach said that the Caucasus Mountains, which is where Georgia and Armenia is located, which is near Russia and Yugoslavia and so on and so forth, in this cold-laden area, this is where he said the paler skin, blonde-haired, blue-eyed phenotype dwelled. And in his opinion, as you just utilized the quote, he said that they were the most beautiful, in his opinion, and virtuous and benevolent people on the earth. With that being said, he put that into place, and that the Mongoloid, which would be your Asian type, or also what you call a Nipponese type. Nipponese is another terminology which is used to describe Japan. This is mean the land of the rising sun in the east. And finally, he coined the term Negroid or / Ethiopian. As I also elucidated last week, the original name of the continent of Africa was Alkebulan, and this is something that Dr. Ben pontificated on. If you will allow me to share that information as well.
Well, I think we're going to run out of time here, man. I want to give big props to Monet Davis, young lady, young African-American girl pitching for the team in Philadelphia.
Great job.
Yes, they were eliminated yesterday in the Little League World Series to the team out of Chicago.
They lost.
Yep. Yeah, they did. But they lost to an all African-American team out of Chicago that has a chance to be the first team in history to win the Little League World Series as an all African-American team.
I think the sky's the limit for this young lady.
Yeah, I do too. I think she has a lot of opportunities. She said basketball was her passion, and I like the fact, Major League Baseball's been chomping on the bit to return to get more African-American youth involved in the game, and this is just, Bud Selig, the new commission, his name is slipping me right now, but he's got to be, doing a little tap dance right now with this kind of free publicity for his sport, even though it's not directly linked to MLB. It's been an initiative, with the RBI and all that, and this has been great. I'm happy to see it personally. I'm a big fan of the game, as most of y'all probably know.
I hope the St. Louis Cardinals are watching. They can use one of those guys or girls.
And Perry, hopefully, maybe we can get her at HBCU. Who knows?
Yeah. Hey, maybe so, man. Maybe so.
The potential may be there. The potential may be there. That may be the catalyst that can get us to the next level.
And as we always say around this time,
ADT, JNS, love you.
Have a good afternoon.
Peace.
Blues Kings in the Catholic Hall. The headlights popping through.
Intellectual stimulation, man, is always good. Like it.
Oh.
Like it.
Hail to the King and Lords of Lords. May He protect us from the evil. Hail to the King, Lords of Lords. May He protect us